Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on Masechtas Yevamot Daf Kuf Chaf Aleph. We're going to begin on Kuf Chaf Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom, with the words V'achai Oichelas. So the Mishnah in yesterday's daf was discussing when a person is able to testify. It has to be when you are definitive that this person has died. What happens if you have a wild animal that attacks? So Amar Yehuda Mishmuel Lo Shanu El Mamakim Shein Nafshe Yotza. If an animal bites a person to a place where the neshama doesn't leave, let's say he bites him on a foot, then obviously he can't give edus. Of a makom shenafshe yotza meidin, and this is actually beferish, exactly the answer to question 3. Ra'u chayed dorsoi. If you see an animal that's pouncing on this person and eating him, him idin alav l'hasiyah ishto. So as the Mishnah said, the Gemara says beferish, it's all totally, it has to be b'makam shenafshe yotza meidin. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shmuel shachid bo shnayim or rov shnayim. A person shechted both the esophagus and the trachea, or the majority of thereof. So the din ubayrach, and then he runs away Eden. So you could testify the fact that this person had this happened to them. There's no question, the one who was shechted, that he's going to die. Let's say this was done, and then he does some type of a hint. Kisu gel ishti, right again for my wife. So you could actually give the get. The question is why? If the person's considered halachically dead, so you can't give a get. Ain't get lachamisa. So it's a raya that it's not any proof that this person's dead. So Gemara says, Chayhu v'sof. He is alive now to be able to give that statement. However, he will eventually die, and therefore this reason why you could testify that he is dead in order for his wife to be able to get remarried. There should be a din golus. Golus, person goes to the city refuge, or mikvah. Alama tanya shachat shnayim arav shnayim hari elu hari zeh enu goyle. So why do we say he doesn't go to golus? So that's enough for a person to be considered to have killed. So the problem is we're concerned that the wind is what caused his death. It says Rashi, haruach mes hilka chagabi golos potter. He didn't actually kill him since he died faster due to the winds. This guy's definitely going to die. The question is, what killed him? Was it the person, or was it the wind afterwards on this open cut? Another pshat, Shema Ihu, as we continue to Kuf Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, maybe he Kirab Misasai, brought his death closer. What does that mean? It says Rashi, Alidei Shapirchas Yoisimedai Mace. So maybe he died faster. It's only when you yourself are the ones that actually kills him. But if he somehow caused the death to take place faster through his shaking or whatnot, so therefore, that's why you're not chayav to go to goal. So my binayu the shach de bebese. Let's say you shach the person in his house. The sheisha, which is made out of marble, specifically she'en shamruach. Rashi says there's no wind at all, so it's uparches, and he's moving back and forth. Inami deshachte bebari, you shut them outside where there's wind, v'lur parches, but he's not moving at all. So again, according to those two pshatim, we'll determine whether or not you be chayav golos. Behuda omer kol loy kol. So is it that you only have 3 days, or do we say it all depends on the situation? So he boilhu. Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, when he says it's not 3 days, it's dependent on the situation. L'kula polig or chomer polig. Is he being lenient or is he being strict? What does that mean? It says Rashi, l'kula polig dekaimer tanakama in me'idin. The Tanakama said you can only testify el ad gimel yomim, within the 3 days of the death. V'yasser Yehuda lememer yeshacha adam o makoy mosha she'enu mahir linfoyach. So maybe saying that there's sometimes you could actually testify more than 3 days, or says Rashi, sometimes even within 3 days you can't testify. So what is he? What is the statement? Kul or chumrah? Tashma. Tahu Gavra, there was a person that Tava Bikarmim, that he drowned in this particular river, which is called Karmi. Ve'askuhu abe hedya, and they brought him out after 3 days. So Basar Tlasi Yaimin, Ve'ansva Ravdimi Menahardal Besu. And Ravdimi allowed her to get married off due to this testimony, to this situation. So even though it was more than 3 days, obviously that meant that it's a cool that we say it's recognizable. Let's do another story to answer this question. Who Gavra Itba Bediglat, that he drowned in the Diglas River. Yaskuhu Agishra de Shabistana, Viansba Rava Ladabesa, Apuma de Shushvine. And so basically, based on this testimony, he allowed her, this woman, after Rashi says 5 days, to be able to get married. Well, Basa Chamisha Yomi, after 5 days. So Iyam Rabbi Shlomo Kula Plagi Inu de David Krebi Yehud ben Baba. So they're holding like this cool. They even after 3 days you can recognize the mace. Who are you holding like? According to him, he's strict, maybe even less than 3 days. This is more than 3 days, even though no one says like that. Shani Maya the Samte. So water, actually, these cases are cases where a person's body was in the water. And the water actually contracts the face. In other words, it causes the body to not decompose as fast. So the body is able to be recognizable. I've read Maya Marzumaka, which is why yesterday I was a little bit confused. We said when it comes to a cut and then you're in the water, it actually makes it worse. So that's when there's a cut. When there's a cut and you're out in the water, then that water is going to cause more problems to that cut. If there's no maka and the guy, let's say, just drowns, his body's intact, then mitzmas somas. Then it actually holds the body in the form better. Says Rashi, it doesn't. The body doesn't change as fast. It's only if you testify once he comes out of the water. However, if he waited after you pulled got him out to identify him, so then the body will end up getting bloated. It says Rashi, and all of a sudden there's a physical change in appearance. So therefore, even if it's maybe more than 3 days when it comes to water, so it's not arrived to kula chumrah, except when it comes to water, we have a little bit more of leniency. But once the body's taken out of the water, you need to be able to testify on the identification immediately. Okay, let's now continue with the next Mishnah. Naful mayim. Person falls into water. Bein sheyesh lahem sov, bein she'ein lahem sov. Whether or not there is any end to this water. In other words, you can see in all directions, and there's nothing but just vast water in all directions, and everywhere you turn. Or let's say that there are areas where he could escape and save himself. Ishto asura. In either situation, this woman is asur. Says Rashi, the savar rameir adim yochel lichiyos. A person could live, and it says on the side that l'schais b'mayim yom o yomayim. A person could swim for a day or two. Just because a person's in an ocean doesn't mean that they're for sure going to die right away. They could possibly tread water for a significant amount of time to survive. Amra meir masbe echad shenafel labor hagadol. He fell into this big pit, and he came out after 3 days. Rav Yosi Mas Besuma, there was a story of a blind person. Shiorid Litbo Bamara. He went to immerse into a cave. Rashi says, Maim Shishahem Sovheim. This is a water in which there was an end to it. Upligi Rav Yosi argues, says Rashi, V'amr Ish Muteras. It says that in that case a woman is allowed to get remarried. The Ein Adam Yochel Lishais B'mayim Kol Kach. A person can't just stay in water for such an extended period of time without drowning. V'yimishim Shema Yatzel Alter, maybe he came out immediately. Ein Zu Chashasha. Why? Deha'i Nafik Havi Chazule. That if he would have come out, you would have seen him coming out. Of a B'mayim Shein Lehem Sov. When it comes to water which has no end, Shein Lehem Sov. Mod Rav Yosi Diasura. Shem Yatzel Alter Lemrachok V'Ruhu. It's possible that you just didn't see him come out. Okay, so the story of this blind person, V'yorid Moishcha Acharav, V'shahu Kadei Shetetzi Nafsham. They waited until the amount of time it takes for a person to die, V'siyuas Nishosayim, and then they allowed their wives to get remarried. V'shum Masa Ba'asya, there was another story, Be'echad Shil Shuhu L'yam, he was lowered into the waters. Will also be Yadam El Ragloi. When he came up, there was only the foot. There was a foot left, which means his body was disconnected. So Amar Chachamim Minhar Kuva Lamala Tinase. If, let's say, the removal was from above the knee, he can get married. Minhar Kuva Lamato Tinase. If, let's say, a shark just bit his foot off, right? So that's possible. Apparently, a person can still live with such a bite. Okay. Tanoban. Nafal Amayim. Bein Sheshem Soy Bein Shenhem Sov Ishtu Asura. Dear Rameir. So Rameir says that doesn't make any difference. The woman is always Asur because this person could survive. Chalam Omer Mayim Sheshem Sov Ishtu Muteras. If there is water which has an end, then the wife is mutter because he drowned. V'shein lehem sov ishto asura, because he may have lived. Now, heichidam imayim sheyesh lehem sov. What does that mean? So, Rabbi, kol she'oimed, if you're standing v'roya mi'arba ruchayisav, and you can see in all four directions. That's what it means. Mayim sheyesh lehem sov. So, in that situation, if you're looking all around and you cannot see any way for this person to survive, so then this person most certainly drowned. Okay. And then the Gemara says like this: Who gavra the tava? It was a person that drowned ba'agma de samke, in this particular swamp, in such a place. Rashi says oimid bim koimo, it stays in its place. The einan mayim chayim, it's not flowing water. K'mayim sheishahem sof damu. Shein yochel lashut al pneihem lemarachoik. You cannot swim. Hilkach im isa the solik havichazule. Again, this is a case where if he somehow could have escaped, it would have been seen. So says the Gemara that ansva Rav Shila l'debesu. So Rav Shila was lenient and allowed her to get remarried. Armu le Rabbi Shmuel ta nishamte. We should put him into cherem for giving this incorrect psak. Similarly, nishalchle bereisha. Let's send him a message first. So shalchle mayim shen lehem sov ishta asura umuteras. So shalchle hu ishta asura, because there's a possibility he could have survived. So va'agma samki mayim sheish lehem sofu mayim shen lehem sof. So shalchle hu mayim shein lehem sofu. And therefore, again, because it's mayim shein lehem sof, so therefore you are not able to see all the areas. So he could have escaped and survived. So my time of it, hachi. So then why did you allow this girl to get married? L'chayra, you're seemingly saying that it wouldn't have been allowed. Mary says, you're right. And mita ta'ina, I actually made a mistake. Ana savri kivan de kavum v'kaim kamayim sheshahem soif damim. I thought this particular type of water was water as it stays in a particular place. It's comparable to mayim sheshahem sof. Velohi kivan de ikagale, there are waves. Emer gale ashpalu. maybe the waves took him away to a far away place, and from there he was able to escape. So you're right. And therefore it shows us, let's put him into cherem, he was wrong. Let's first find out. Let's get the information down. He says, you know what? You were right. I made a mistake. And therefore, it was good that they didn't just quickly jump to conclusions. They would not allow any sin to fall. There should be salvation for the great amount of counsel. There's a story of two people, and they were setting nets in the Yarden River. And one of them went to a cave which had fish. And the sun set suddenly, and didn't see where this guy was. So Pischa Shel Mechila, the opening of this cave. So he's basically stuck there, and it's dark. V'shachavero, so his friend waited for him. Kadei sheteti nafsho, the amount of time that it was inevitable he probably had drowned. Uvavo haidia b'tech beis, so he went to the house to let her know. U'machar zar chacham, the sun shone. V'hikar Pischa Shel Mechila, and he saw the opening to this cave. Uval matza hespit gadol b'toich beisai, and he saw there was a huge eulogy in the house. Amar Rabbi kama gedayon divrei chachamim. How great are the words of chachamim? Sher b'mayim sheish himself ishto muteres, shen himself ishto asura. So you jump to conclusions to think that I drowned. The truth is, I just didn't know how to get out. And the next morning, when the sun shone, I was able to figure out how to get out of that area. We should always be afraid of Mechil Shel Dagim, that maybe he was in this particular area where fish are, and somehow he was able to survive everything. So we should always be concerned. So b'mayim sheisha himself, when Mechil Shel Dagim l'shchicha, it's not this type of thing is not readily found in this area. So therefore, it's not a reason to assume to therefore then say, okay, then she can never get married. That much we're not going to do. Again, a situation where you can't see everything, so therefore the woman is aser. That's only if you're talking about a regular person. If it's a Talmud Chacham, then there's no. She's going to be mutter. Why? Because Ida Salik, if let's say he came out alive, Kol Isla, everyone would be talking about it. Because a great tzaddik was saved, it would be the talk of the town. Therefore, the fact that no one's talking about it obviously means that he's dead, and therefore she's allowed to get married. The truth is, it doesn't make any difference if it's being that l'chatchila you cannot get married based on this type of water. But yes, this is question 5. So he said that when we're dealing with mayim she'ein lehem sof. Okay. Famous Gemara. Tanya. Rabbi Gamliel. Pama chasis mahalach b'sfina, as he often is found on a boat. Re'isi sfina acha shenishbra. I saw there was this boat that was broken. Ba'isim et star al Talmud Chacham. Shiba. I felt very bad because I knew there was a Talmud Chacham that was on that boat. Umanhu Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was on this boat. So Rabbi Gamliel felt very bad because he figured that probably the only reality in this situation is he must have drowned. Actually, before we continue the story, look at Rashi. Mechil Shel Dagim shechaytetin samachas fasanar, that they dig in near the edge of the river, bein lomata min hamayim, even like below the water, bein lomala min hamayim, begoyves safasai, ve'ein mismales kula, it doesn't get filled up completely with water. The adam hanichna sham magbit savarai b'tay chamara, a person can lift up his neck lomala min hamayim, above the water. So it's possible that you could be in some type of a cave that for some reason, even though it looks like the water's above it, but there could be air pockets basically, and that's what happened. He was able to survive in that way. So again, Rabbi Kiva was on this boat that broke. Ukshalisi be'abasha, and when Rabbi Leah went to the dry land, he came. The yashav, he sat. The dun lefanai b'halacha, and he was judging in front of me in halacha, and this is referring to Rabbi Kiva. So, which was quite shocking. He was there. He thought he died. So on this, Amarti lo, I said to him, Bani mi ha'elcha, who brought you up? Who spared you? Who saved you from the treacherous waters all around you? Zarmali dafshel svina nizdaminli. There was a board of the boat that I happened to grab on. The whole boat was destroyed, and I was able to grab hold onto a daf, onto a board. The whole gal v'gal, and every wave, shaballah, that came to me, nenanti lo roishi. I moved my head, so Rashi, v'avar al gabi v'holachlo. Basically, it went over me, and I was able to survive it. Mekan amr chachamim im yavu rishayim al adam yana al roishai. That if the chacham say that if a rasha comes to a person, you should basically move your head. You should, says Rashi, yircha, dodge them. Memnei hasha v'lo yisgar behen, and therefore they're not going to bother you. So basically, whenever that huge wave came, he just ducked underneath it, and the water went over him. So he was able to be spared because he was holding onto this board. So Rabbi Meir Shapiro, the founder of Daf Yomi, learns a beautiful drasha from this. And he said, the answer to mi helcha, who caused you to survive, the daf. You can say it means it's a board, you hold onto the board, but also it's a question for us. What causes you to be able to live? What causes you to be able to move on and to be able to survive all the problems of the world? And the answer is a daf, the Gemara. Rabbi Shapiro said, I held onto and survived all of the crashing waves of life by holding on to the daf. And we again see from here that when it comes to a rasha, badness comes upon you, bend your head down and learn. Basically just dodge the waves that come crashing at you and just delve into the daf, into the Gemara in front of you. Fine. Amarti be'oisa shah kama gedolim devi chachamim she'omer mayim sheish lahem soif muteres mayim she'en lahem sof asura. Fine. Tanya Rabbi Akiva pamach hasis mahalach b'sfina. So the same Rabbi Akiva was on a boat. Re'isi svina achas shemi terefes bayom. There was this boat that was not doing well in the water. I knew Rameir was on that boat, and I was worried about it. So Rameir was sitting there learning Torah. What caused you to survive? Gal Turadani Basically, the wave pushed me to the other wave, and one wave to the next, until I finally got to dry land. So somehow Rameir was also able to be spared from a potential life-threatening situation. Tanrabanan. If a person falls into a lion's den, ein me'idin alav, you cannot testify because maybe the lions are not going to consume you. However, l'chvura malaya nachashim v'akarabim me'idin alav. If let's say you fall into a huge pit of snakes and scorpions, you can testify most certainly got killed. If you heard Masera Omer, af l'chvura malaya nachashim v'akarabim ein me'idin alav. We do not necessarily assume that for sure you're going to get killed by these snakes and scorpions. Chashina, as we continue to Kuf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis Shema Chaverhu. Maybe you're able to do some type of enchantment. Rashi's Yodea Lil Chaish. But Tanakama Agav Itza Maskile. The reality is, if you're near snakes and scorpions, they may not kill you. But when you land on top of them, they feel that they're being attacked and they're going to kill you. Tanarbana. Okay, question 4. Nafal Goy Barayos and the Chashim Akravim Hemi Eden Allah. So when it comes to a lion's den, it says Eden. Did I read it correctly? Nafal Goy Barayos Ain Eden Allah. What does it say over here? Question 4. Nafal of this He'im Eden Allah. Question 4. Legobarais Me'eden. It's Ain Me'eden. I'm not sure why they wrote Me'eden. It's Beferish. It says Nafal Legobarais Ain Me'eden Allah. And Nachashim Akravim is a Machlokas. Okay. Okay. Weiter. Tanarbana. Nafal Atoich Kivshan Ha'esh. If a person falls into a fiery furnace, Me'idin alav, you can testify. We yoyra malei yayin, a vat filled of wine, Mishem Me'idin alav, again, that's probably the guy's going to die. Mishum Rabbi Acha Omer Shel Shemen Me'idin alav, Memnei Shehu Mavir. When it comes to that, the heat of the pot will kill you. Shel yayin in Me'idin alav, Memnei Shehu Mechabe. Because the wine is not as dangerous as Rashi. Even though you can't leave the wine, because the vat actually cools off. Now once it's extinguished, it's not as hot, so it's not like going to burn you up. Amrulai, so they said to him, Tchilasai Machabe. Originally, it is the bubbles will extinguish the fire. V'sayfa Mavir, actually at the end, it ends up getting hotter again. So Rashi Chayzeres V'Derlekas Yosimib Tchilasa. So because of that, the reality is maybe because of that we are strict. Okay, let's see a couple more questions now before we get too far ahead of ourselves. So, question TA 14 says like this: Ad kama yomim, for how many days? After lehed al mace. So on this, the Mishnah said 3 days, and it says umatai after lehed afil yoser mikan. So ad gimel yomim, but tava b'mayim after afil mi yoser. However, if you fall into water, so then the din may be that you have a little bit more time than that. That was TA 14. Okay? So that's what we said, that Shani Maya dat Samte. So normally you have only 3 days. However, when it comes to water, so there we're a little bit more lenient. Okay, question TB14. Be'ez oifen me'idin al heker panim afil acher gimel yamim umadua, and I guess this is the same answer. Kishetava b'yam mishum shahamayim saimtin vein manichin l'tzuras panim l'ishdanais. A person's face doesn't change when they come out of the water, and therefore it's not a problem. That was TB14. That was TB14. We had TB13, so it's the same, almost the same question. Let's see, maybe question 15. Nafal l'mayim. If a person falls into water, echad ein lehem sof, u'masad sheni yesh lehem sof, im ishto muteras. So in that situation, the woman is going to be asur. Okay. Let's see. Nafal l'mayim. Let me just quote the beginning of this Mishnah. TB 15. Okay. All right, let's continue. So let's continue the two dots now. So Omer Rab Meir, Masa Be'echad, Shenafel Bar Gadol. So Tanya, Omer Lil Rab Meir, Ein Maskirin Masinisim. So even though that may have happened, the person survived, we don't mention miracles. Miracles you can't learn from. Says Rashi, I feel Enu Meis Machmas Amayim, Haylo Lomos Machmas Davaracher. Should have died anyway. So my Maisinisim, in the case of the 3 days, again, okay, fine. Somehow he didn't drown 3 days, but he also didn't eat or drink. When it came to Megillas Esther, we find a person could survive without food or water for 3 days. It's the fact is that he couldn't sleep. The fact that you couldn't sleep for 3 days, someone would even make a shua in that regard, so we know it's impossible, and therefore we'll just give the guy malchus right away and go to sleep. A mayor my taima, after all, it's a miracle, so how does he understand it? So Rav Kahana, kifin, that there was an arch. In other words, he actually slept on the arch. Al gab kifin havi rabbanan desheisha hava. What is that? So Rashi says the chalokim, he would slip off. Umud in adam yashin. A person is not able to sleep under such conditions. Rameir says Iefsher Deloy Misrach V'noim Porta. It's not possible to say that he couldn't have just grabbed onto it. Says Rashi Mischazik V'nidbak Alehin Ma'at. He could have at least slept a little bit. So as long as you're able to sleep even a drop, that should be enough. There's a story about this daughter of this man who was involved in providing water for the Olu Regolim, and she nafla bar gadol. She fell into this huge pit. Uvava haydil Rav Chanina ben Daisa. Sharish and Armelhem Shalom. Shni Armelhem Shalom. So he said everything's fine, and then Shlishus Armelhem also. In the third hour, he said, "Oh, she came out already." So this Rashi says, a person can't survive that long. Armelhem also, it must be she came up. She had duahaya. He knew that there's no way she could have died there. Rashi says, Davar Shahaya misasik ba'oisat tzadik avia l'yachashal zara. So we're going to see this in the Gemara, that something in which this person had specialty in chesed, there's no way that his daughter would be punished that way. Or killed that way. So Biti mi halech, who brought you up? So Zachar ben Rachelim nizdabenli. There was this male ram, which Rashi says Ze'elu shel Yitzchak. But Zakin manhigai, and there was an elderly man that guided. And Rashi says Ze'avraham. Amru Naviata. She said, "How are you a navi that you knew that she didn't die?" So he Amru will navi anochi will ben navi anochi. El adavar shet tzadik misasik by Yechashba Zarai. Yechashba Zara, certainly not. So I knew that she was going to live. Rabbi Abba Afal Pikein, Meis Beno Batsama. Nonetheless, even though that's all fine and well, but actually his son ended up dying by thirst. Shnemar Usaviva Nisharam Oid. That all around him, all around is turbulent. So Molamid Shekadosh Baruch Hu Medaktikim Savivav Kechut Asaira, that Hashem judges the tzaddik even to the finest letter of the law, to the smallest little hair. Rabbi Chanina Omer Mahacha El Narotz B'Tzaid Kedoshim Rabba V'Noira Al Kol Savivav. Okay, next Mishnah. And fine, next Mishnah. If you shomim in anoshim, even if let's say you heard women gossiping, oimrois meis ish ploini, that this man died, that's enough for her to get remarried. Maybe Yehuda oimer feel shomim in the tinaikis, even if you hear little kids talking, oimrim hariyanu hayachin lisboid v'likforas ish ploni. Oh yeah, there's this eulogy in a cemetery, a funeral of this such and such a person. That's enough to be able to go and she can get married. Bein shu mischaven, bein shein mischaven. Whether it was said intentionally or not. Yehuda ben Baba Omer B'Yisrael, if it's a Yid, Alpha B'Yisrael mischaven, even with intention, we'll still believe them. V'kachavim imohayim mischaven enu edus and edus. We're not going to believe in v'kachavim if their intention is to free her, because maybe he's going to be makalko. But Dilma Lo Azli, I don't understand. Why are we assuming that these kids are saying the right testimony and therefore allowing her to get married based on this? It's hard to imagine. Dilma Lo Azli, maybe they never went to the funeral. So we just came back. We were at that cemetery. We were at that eulogy. Maybe it was a grasshopper that was killed. And they gave this grasshopper a human name. So how do you know they actually went to a funeral? Maybe they went to the funeral of a pet. How do you know they're talking about this person? They say that there were these rabbis that were there. These were people that eulogized. Obviously, if they're saying this, it's not talking about some great rabbis coming to speak about a grasshopper. It must have been this actual person. So if he had kavana, then it's not edus. Then we don't believe him. If they came to testify, then it's good, says Rashi. Their intention is not to have her get remarried, and therefore the edus is good. And based on that, Rashi still says that she could get married. So how do we know the intention of the Chachamim? To know whether or not we should listen to them or not. Rav Yosef, based in the Omer. Let's say they come to the base and they say, quote, Ish poini meis, tasies ishtoi, zeu nischaven lahater. If they specifically say, this guy died, now she should get married, so they're obviously coming for that purpose. Meistam, if let's say all it was he just said, oh yeah, this guy died, so zen is chaven le'edus, and therefore we listen to them. Idmar nami omerei shachar shoshan el shen chaven lahater. Of his chaven lehei edus and edus. Amar Rabbi Yochanan lo kach haya ma'isa ba'oisha b'ribi. Was it not that there was such a story? Shehitiram im shmoinim v'chamisha zakenim, that you could either say shehitiram matir, or on the side said Sarchlemer shehitris, that they were fighting with 85 elders. So lo shanu el shneskav lahater, amneskav lahei dedusen edos, v'lo hodu chachamim. But yet it says that the chachamim did not agree to this. Ela masnisin retani v'over chachamim imohim neskavin enudusen edos. So so when would we actually say that edus works? As we've seen this concept, we'll see in a second the story about this, that if it's not intending to actually give edus, they just are talking in general, and therefore, since they're just having general conversation, they're probably telling the truth. Ki Yehuda havi ka'amer v'azol, person was going and saying, Man ika be chivoi. Who are these people? Says Rashi, Mi anshe beisai shel beis chivia. Who are the people from this home? Sheyishma devara deshachiv chivoi. They heard that this person died. Man ika be chivoi. So shachiv chivoi, he died. Tiatz Rav Yosef with the beisu, and therefore, based on this testimony, was really testimony, was just Mesicha Futuma, so they were able to allow her to get married. Woe to these fast horse riders, that they died. So again, based on this being Masechah Vitumai, there's enough that they can get married. This person drowned, this person the chasa. So Rav Nachman Holokim Ochel Kavri Chasa, that these fish consumed chasa. Medibid Rav Nachman Azlo the Besu, the chasa. He went to the wife of chasa, and they allowed her to get remarried. So Amr Level me, no one said anything. So Rav Ashi Shemamina Hadim Rabbanim Mayim Shein Lehem Soiv Ishtar Surah Hadim Yolachat Chila Avol Inatziv Lo Mavkin Lumine. If they already got married, we're not going to tell them to not get married. Igad Yamri, some say that Ansava, go get married. Rav Nachman of the Beso. So Amr Chasal Gava Rabba Isay Im Isa the Salad Kala Islay Lamilse Velohi Loshna Gava Rabba Loshna Lav Gava Rabba. Do you have it in l'chatchila lo? So we said it doesn't make any difference what type of who it was. Nonetheless, it's only b'di'evid if they got married l'chatchila not. That kind.